worked part-time at a search and rescue for the better part of a decade, off and on. It started as something to do in the summers during college, some gig that made me feel useful, got me into the hills that I grew up in, and looked pretty damn good on a resume, I'll have to admit. But I stuck with it longer than I ever really meant to, well into my 30s, even after my day job in maintenance took up most of my time. Something about it just kept pulling me back. I liked being needed, liked the challenge of it. Most calls were nothing. Some hiker would twist an ankle a mile off the trail. A teenager would get separated from the family reunion. A dog had accidentally fallen down a wash and wouldn't come back up. But every now and again, you'd get one that would twist your gut in a way that you can't really explain. There's a spot in our county that everybody on the team dreads. I'm not going to name it out of respect for the families and because honestly, I don't want anybody thinking it's some kind of challenge. Let's just say it's a far corner of the national park, a dense stretch of land that doesn't get much foot traffic unless people are lost or looking to be. A tangle of thickets and game trails, nothing marked or cleared. No roads in or out, except for one old maintenance path that's mostly used by deer. Every single time we get a call there, it feels off. And I'm not saying like the place is cursed or something, but I'll say this, when people go missing in that zone, it usually stays that way. We've pulled bodies from cliff sides and riverbeds. We've found hikers dehydrated and half mad crawling towards the sun. But that area, that stretch of woods, it's like a mouth that swallows people whole. There's never any clear sign, no trail, no final clue. They just simply vanish. I've seen seasoned guys on our team get turned around out there like greenhorns, GPS glitching, radios going out, even dogs refusing to track. One time we lost contact with a 3-man search team for nearly 6 hours. They were maybe 2 miles out and couldn't explain what happened when we finally found them. They said it felt like time skipped, said they were walking and suddenly it was dark. Now, I used to chalk it up to nerves, terrain fatigue, but after the 2011 incident, the one with the couple, I stopped making all these excuses. That was the last time I volunteered for a call near that zone too. I still think about them far more often than I should, and what we found and what we didn't. You sign up for this job thinking you're going to be a hero, drag some kid out of a ravine, get your name in the paper, shake some grateful father's hand. You don't imagine, however, combing the woods for days only to come back with nothing more than questions, or findings that you can't ever explain. But that's what happened out there, and I personally have never been the same since. The call came in around 6:40 p.m. on a Wednesday in the early fall, 2011. An older couple had been reported missing by their daughter after they failed to return her messages all day long. They'd checked in with her mid-morning before setting out on a hike through the national park, what should have been a casual 3-hour loop, and then she hadn't heard from them since. Rangers located their vehicle parked nearby the west entrance, windows cracked a bit, maps still folded up in the glove box. They'd signed in at the trailhead registry, but they hadn't signed out. By the time we were mobilized and briefed, they'd been unaccounted for nearly 12 hours. We all figured the same thing, a bad fall, a twisted knee, maybe the husband tried to go for help and then got turned around. These weren't kids, and they were in their 70s, and the wife had a replacement knee, if I remember right. The sun was already low when we met up at base, so we planned for a 2-hour sweep. Just enough to catch any signs before full dark. I got paired with Marquez, an ex-Army guy who didn't say much but had an eye for the terrain. We were tasked with Sector 5, a winding stretch near the ridgeline. Guess where that was? Right on the border of the bad zone that I told you about. The search started like any other, quiet and focused, headlamps on, radios chirping. We kept to the path at first, calling their names every few minutes, pausing to listen. You can hear a twig snap from a mile off out there. It was dead quiet. No owls, no frogs, not even the wind. An hour or so in, the reports started coming through. No bodies, no sightings, just stuff. Munson and Davis found an old backpack, half covered in leaves. The tags were sun-bleached, zipper rusted. Inside were granola wrappers and a moldy paper bag. Definitely didn't belong to the missing couple. Then, later Jamie called in about a torn flannel jacket tangled up on a branch. Downhill from that, she found a pair of old hiking boots with no laces. Again, not our people, but really weird. Then Marquez and I came across something worse, A campsite. Not the couple's, but this one had clearly been there for a while. Tarp was half rotted, sleeping bag wet and sunken into the earth like it had grown there itself. There was a rusted camping stove still set up, like somebody just got up and walked away. Next to it, half buried under pine needles, was this Polaroid photo. Faded, water damaged, but you could still make out a face, a kid, maybe 16. Big grin, braces, holding up a fish, and on the back in a marker it said, Benny, 1997. Marquez didn't say anything, he just handed it to me and kept walking. But I could tell from the way his flashlight was jittering that he was actually spooked. We reported the site and continued moving on. By the time we rejoined the main trail, nearly everybody else had found something else. Pieces of gear, single gloves, shattered glasses, broken walkie-talkies, but no people, and none of it matching the missing couple. It felt like the woods were coughing up junk from the last decade. We regathered near the North Fork where we heard voices up ahead, low muttering, not coming from any radio. I thought maybe it was the couple and picked up my pace, calling out, "Hello, search and rescue." But when we got close, it wasn't them. Two men stood just off the trail, near a bend in the brush. Both were filthy, dressed in layered camo and flannels, skin covered in grime and what looked like soot too. One of them had a gnarled beard full of burrs, and the other was taller, with long gray hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. They watched us approach without moving. "You fellas seen anybody come through here?" Marquez asked, voice calm but clipped. "We're looking for an elderly couple, been gone about a half day." The taller one spoke first. "Ain't seen nobody but you," he said, then glanced up at the trees. "There's some squirrels." "You guys out trapping or what?" I asked, trying to keep things friendly. "Got a permit?" He nodded slowly. "All legal. Trap staked and flagged. You can check." I noticed the smaller man kept shifting behind a tree like he didn't want to be seen clearly. There was a smell too, like meat gone bad in the sun. They didn't look homeless exactly, but something was definitely off about them. Their eyes, I think, they just didn't blink enough, and they weren't carrying any packs, gear, food, no water, just a long curved knife on the belt of the shorter one. "If you do see anybody, alive or otherwise, please let one of the rangers know," I said. The bearded one smiled back. His teeth were yellow and spaced weirdly, like baby teeth that never grew right. "We'll be sure to holler at you," he said. Then they turned and disappeared into the trees without another word. We radioed it in, described them as best we could, but there was no law against being weird, you know? They were gone before anybody else could intercept. I look back and I swear I couldn't hear a single footstep as they move off, just gone like vapor. The mood just clearly shifted after that. We kept at the grid, but everybody got quieter. Nobody wanted to split up again, at least not really. The signs of the couple were nowhere, but more odd things kept turning up. A cracked watch, a half-burned driver's license with no name visible, a blood-stained bandana, just random shit, and too much of it. Eventually, the call came through to pull back for the night. We'd regroup and get the dogs first thing in the morning. Everybody was accounted for, no injuries, but morale was low. Nobody said it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. This was not going to end with a warm reunion and a chopper ride out. It was already over. We just didn't know how bad it was yet. As we hiked out, Marquez muttered, "You ever see gear that old out here before?" I shook my head. "Not that much of it, and not like that." He didn't say anything else, just kept looking over his shoulder every few minutes like something was following us in the dark. We were back on trail at first light. Fog still hung between the trees like gauze, thick enough to make our headlamps useless for that first hour. The dogs were brought in, but they didn't track well, kept getting distracted and sniffing off in odd directions, then whining and sitting down like they were tired before they'd even started. One of the handlers, this guy named Kenny, muttered something under his breath. "You really don't like this place." And nobody argued with him. Around mid-morning, we pushed into the part of the woods that hadn't been gridded yet. Thick canopy, weirdly quiet. I spotted something shiny ahead and called it out to the others. It turned out to be a metal thermos, still upright like somebody just set it down. Next to it was a fleece jacket folded neatly. The color and size matched the wife's description. Then came the real horror. 20 yards from there, buried underneath a scatter of ferns and rotted leaves, we found what looked like a blanket until we turned it over. It was a half-torn piece of a rainfly, soaked in blood, still wet at the edges. Nearby were eyeglasses snapped in half, and a hiking pole with a streak of what looked like flesh caught up in the tip. It wasn't just 1 or 2 drops, we're talking a pool, sprayed across the brush and trailing towards one of the base of the trees. Immediately we fanned out, calling their names, but nothing, no movement, not even birds. Just that creeping dread that something terrible had gone down here, and it happened recently. Marquez found this shredded pack stuffed into a hollow stump. Inside was a woman's driver's license, her name matching the report. Bits of granola bar still inside the side pocket, water bottle half full. Why leave all that behind? Then came the trap. Kenny stepped too close to a pine and set it off. A spike board, camouflaged and rigged to fall from above. It missed his skull by inches but tore through his arm and embedded into the ground. We got him stabilized and evac'd out quick, but after that, nobody wanted to stay. We were search and rescue operators, not infantry. This was no longer a rescue, it was something else entirely. That night, the operation got scaled back. Rangers swept the area, found 2 more traps, and shut it all down. They never officially said it was the trappers that we met, but we all knew. The problem was, they never found those guys again. There's no cabin, no camp, no names on file. It was like they never existed. The couple was declared and presumed dead after 3 weeks. Their bodies were never found. Just some blood, gear, and that overwhelming feeling that we were being watched that whole damn time out there. Occasionally people will ask why I quit search and rescue, and I don't really say much. I just tell them it was the time. Truth is, those woods took something from me, and I still think about those men, mud covered, staring from behind the trees. Where the hell did they go? I did 1 season of search and rescue back when I thought I wanted to make something more out of my free time. I wasn't just some aimless drifter or even a guy with a death wish. I just like being outside. I like the challenge of hiking through rough country with a pack on my back and a reason to do it. Maybe I like the idea of being the guy who shows up when things go bad, the one people are grateful to see. And at first, it really felt like it was my calling. The gear, the physical grit, the sense of purpose, but that kind of wore off fast. The season hit me harder than I really thought it was going to. I definitely didn't expect the emotional whiplash. 1 minute you're laughing your ass off with your crew on the trail, the next you're bagging a body that's been half-eaten by coyotes. There's no easing into it. No training manual prepares you for the way people look at you when they're at the end of the rope. Lost, injured, starving, screaming. I remember the first time we found somebody barely alive, slumped over a log like a wet rag. We brought him in, got him stable, and he kept crying, sobbing like a kid because he was convinced himself he was gonna die out there. You see somebody like that and you start wondering how thin the line really is between the ones who make it out and the ones who don't. I started having trouble sleeping, not every single night, but often enough that I took notice of it. I lie awake replaying calls in my head, wondering what I missed, what I didn't do right, and what we didn't find. I stopped telling people that I worked at search and rescue after a while too. Didn't want to answer the same questions over and over. Didn't want to give them some kind of hero story. They didn't get it and I didn't blame them. But out of all the calls that we ran into that season, there is one that I still think about a lot more than I should. It was late fall, just before the weather turns into real winter, when the air starts getting mean at night and the wind takes on a different sound. We got a call about a group of climbers stuck up on a high peak. You've probably heard about it if you're local. Tallest point in the county, beautiful in the summer, but a bastard when those clouds roll in. I'd been up there before in good weather and it was still a hell of a haul. This wasn't supposed to be anything unusual. Experienced climbers, well prepared, just caught off by a surprise storm. It happens a lot more often than you think it does. We figured that we'd reach them, stabilize whoever needed it, then get them moving downhill, routine stuff. But that mission did not go the way it was supposed to. Something went very wrong up there, and to this day I'm not sure I understand what we really walked into. We got the call at 12:27 p.m. They'd triggered their emergency beacon and followed it up with a frantic call to dispatch. The woman on the line, Erica, sounded terrified. She said they were trying to descend, that they were cold and lost. One of their teammates had lost his mind. That was the exact phrase she used. He's totally gone off the rails. We don't know what to do. The Rangers pulled a map of the area, gridded out the last known location, and sent us up. The storm had rolled in fast and hard. It hadn't been on any forecast that morning that I saw. It was cold rain at the trailhead, but higher up it was snowing and piling up fast. The highest peak wasn't a technical climb unless you veered off route. But in a whiteout, you may as well have been on Everest. The wind will cut straight through your jacket and you can't even hear yourself breathe. We hiked for a little over 2 hours, switchback after switchback, soaked through despite every single layer I had on. Half my fingers were numb. I had a radio clipped to my chest and kept checking for chatter from the missing climbers. But nothing, just static and wind. We kept moving. The higher we climbed, the more the storm pushed against us though. The mountain almost felt like it was trying to shove us back down. Around the 4-mile mark, we found her, Erica. She was crouched beneath a boulder overhang, arms wrapped around her knees, face crusted over with ice. Her lips were cracked, her eyes were glassy. When we called out, she flinched like we were about to hit her. It took her a second to even realize that we weren't a threat. "Where are the others?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head and just said, "Reggie," and then started to cry. We gave her water, wrapped her up in an emergency blanket, and slowly pulled the story out of her while the medic checked her vitals. They'd started the climb around 4 in the morning, hoping to summit and descend before dark. Around 10, the storm had slammed them, heavy snow with zero visibility. They turned around and tried to follow their GPS back down, but the cold was setting in too fast. Fingers were stiff, gear was soaked, poor traction. One of them slipped and another started panicking, and Reggie got weird. "He just stopped talking," Erica said. "Wouldn't answer anybody. He kept looking out at nothing like he was listening to something that we couldn't hear. Then, out of nowhere, he just walks away. Not like he was running or scared, like he was following something." We called out, tried to stop him, but he was only 100 yards off, but never turned around, didn't acknowledge us, just kept moving down the slope through the trees like we weren't there. Then, an hour later, he comes back. He no longer had his gloves, he didn't have his hat, his ears were blue, and he was smiling. The others asked where he'd gone, if he was okay, but he never answered. He sat down in the snow and started to pull his boots off. "I told him to stop," she whispered. "I begged him, but he took off his socks and then he lunged at Parker and bit him. Bit him." At that point, Erica said she panicked and took off, ran until her legs gave out. She said she'd rather freeze than wait around to see what Reggie was about to do next. At that point, I looked at my team and nobody said it, but we were all thinking the same thing. We might not be dealing with the rescue anymore. We set up for a signal for an air evac to grab Erica, then pushed higher up the trail. The light was going fast. Snow kept blinding our headlamps. We followed her rough directions, but every few minutes we'd have to stop and orient ourselves again. Our boots were punching through fresh powder and wet shale, very hard terrain. That's when we stumbled upon them. Bare footprints, just feet, no boots, no socks, human toes, frozen and red, peeling deep in the snow, staggered and erratic, like whoever left them was limping or stumbling. There were smears too, dark stains in the snow that we did not want to acknowledge, but it was blood, some of it still wet. One of the guys radioed in. "Tracks heading northwest, not very old." We followed them until they vanished near a slope that dropped into a thick pine belt. No sign of a fall, just gone. Another mile or so up, we finally found the rest of the climbers, huddled under emergency tarp. 2 were conscious. 1 was unconscious with a nasty head gash. They looked like they'd been through a war. Their cheeks were windburned raw, lips cracked, eyes sunken. Parker had a bandage across his head, duct taped clumsily. We got them warmed up and stabilized. One of them, Tyler I think his name was, just kept mumbling to himself. He's not right, he's not right. They told us Reggie had come back one last time, rushed them, swinging a rock and hitting the unconscious guy in the face. Then screaming something nobody could understand, tore off his jacket and sprinted off back into the white. Nobody had seen him since. The rest of the operation was just triage and retrieval. We didn't go chasing him through the blizzard. It was too dark and too cold. We had injured climbers who'd die if we didn't get them down fast. Reggie had gone off into the snow barefoot with no gear, no lights, and a head full of static. It didn't make sense to me though. Hyperthermia makes people act strange, sure, but this wasn't confusion or fatigue. This was something far deeper. It was literally like something inside him broke, clean in half, like he saw or heard something nobody else did, and whatever it was, it took him with him. The climbers got down safely that night somehow. The evac was messy and took hours, but nobody else died. Parker ended up needing surgery on his hand, and the guy with the head wound pulled through, but it took some time, a long time, to get his memory back. None of them ever really gave a straight story about what happened to Reggie either. Not after the first debrief. It got quiet really fast. We did another sweep in the morning after the wind had died down and the sun had made the snow look clean again. Still no sign of Reggie though. The bare footprints didn't really lead anywhere. There was no body, no pack, no gear. Some of the guys joked about mountain spirits, wendigos, cabin fever crap, but none of them really stuck. We all felt something out there. A few weeks later, I left the search and rescue team for good. I told them the on-call stuff was too hard on my work schedule, which wasn't a lie, but really, I just didn't want to be out there anymore. Not in that way. Not with that kind of responsibility. It changes you, seeing somebody break like that. One minute he's helping you tie down ropes and plan elevation shifts, and the next, he's barefoot and bloody, biting his teammate and screaming at the wind. And then, he's dead. They found his body in the spring. A hiker spotted it inside this runoff gully, 3,000 feet down from where we last saw him. Broken in a way that suggested he'd fallen hard and fast. His clothes were mostly gone, just this thermal shirt shredded open. No pants, no boots, and no signs of any animals. Just his body twisted around a boulder like the impact of a dummy, jaw open, eyes sunken, face half gone. The coroner didn't say much in the report. Exposure, blunt force trauma, likely hypothermia-induced psychosis. Standard stuff, I guess. But the guys on our team who saw the scene firsthand said there were footprints around him, like somebody else had stood there just looking at him. No prints leading in or out, just a few in the snowpack, a stride or two long, then nothing else. Sometimes I still think about Reggie, how fast he came apart, and I wonder if it was really the cold or if there was something else up there with them, something that doesn't like being seen. I don't believe in monsters or ghosts, but I do believe the wilderness can eat at a person's mind, especially when they're alone. Whatever it was that took Reggie, I hope it stays up there on the mountain. And I hope I never get another radio call from that peak again, because honestly, I don't think the mountain gave Reggie back. I think it just got full and then let the leftovers tumble down. I've volunteered with search and rescue outside of Flagstaff for years now, covering stretches of the I-40 corridor through places like Seligman. Most calls there involve rollovers, car chases, hikers who just wander off. Nothing super out of the ordinary. We're used to the chaos, but that's chaos with some asphalt underfoot, not the wilderness itself. In February, it changed everything. A call came over the radio that made my stomach go cold. 2-year-old Bowden Allen had vanished from his front yard. A toddler, gone. We mobilized deputies, volunteers, troopers, the full local apparatus. Within hours, over 40 people had fanned out across the valley, back roads, wooded patches, diners, playgrounds, anywhere a child might wander off to. The community's heart pounded with each passing minute as darkness continued to creep in. Families gathered, prayers rising up with every flashlight beam. We called names, Bowden, 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 over and over. Prayers then turned into echoes. Parents cried. Searchers said nothing. There was far too much at stake, and as night settled in, 1,000 eyes scanned the rooftops under the porches, only to see nothing. At dawn, we got word of something new, 7 miles away on the Dunton farm. That morning, rancher Scotty Dunton and his massive guard dog Buford unlocked some kind of miracle. Buford emerged from the woods leading little Bowden, haggard and still clutching the dog's fur, for help. The boy repeatedly said he slept under a tree. The entire countryside immediately breathed again. If you know the hills around 𝐬𝐫𝐞, you know just how unlikely this rescue truly was. The boy walked through arroyos, across washes, along abandoned highways on ramps alone. All night long, predators moved too. The Department of Public Safety and helicopters had spotted 2 mountain lions prowling within a mile of that child's path. Now, before you picture this feel-good story, know this. What happened wasn't just miraculous, it was bone-deep frightening. A toddler alone in the high desert with mountain lions circling, and then down to his undies, this kid was walking miles in the cold. And then Buford, a big dog who didn't hesitate to stay with him until help arrived. If those big cats had closed in, Bowden would not be here. Not unless Buford had it in him to walk him down that early morning light. Search parties were combing the other way, helicopters were passing overhead, and they never saw him. This isn't folklore either, it's real. I was there. I remember the panic, the grief, and the dust in our throats as we prayed a child wouldn't be just another body under a juniper tree. I remember the moment somebody radioed in, "He's alive." Get ready. Next, I'll walk you through what we saw during that long night, how the land shifted around us at dawn, and how Buford's instincts cut through the darkness, so buckle up. The call came in just like any other, short, sharp, and no real details. Missing child, 2 years old, last seen on the Allen property near 𝐬𝐫𝐞. That was it. No car crash, no hike gone sideways, just a boy who was now gone. I rolled out with my gear in the bed of my truck, radio squawking updates every couple of minutes. By the time I hit the edge of 𝐬𝐫𝐞, the place was already crawling. Deputies flagging intersections, locals organizing by the diner, folks with homemade flyers going door to door like it was a hostage situation. The air was tense and you could feel it in your teeth. The Allens were already outside, mother in a chair with her head in her hands, and the father pacing back and forth, red-eyed, waving at anybody who pulled up. They weren't hysterical, they were completely wrecked. That quiet, exhausted kind of wrecked when you only see people when they realize their worst nightmare might already be happening. We were told Bowden was last seen around 1:30 p.m., just playing near the side of the house, and then nothing. One minute he's there, the next moment he's gone. We started the usual way we do. Concentric circles from the last known point. Drones, dog teams, thermal scopes. Every backyard, every shed, every undercarriage of every car got looked at. And as the hours ticked by, a bad feeling began to settle over all of us. A 2-year-old can't get this far unless something takes him. We were all thinking it, but nobody wanted to actually say it. I took a sector by the train tracks east of town. Scrubby mesquite, gravel, trash piles. You'd be amazed how fast you can lose somebody out here. A kid that small, low to the ground, they disappear between patches of sage like smoke would. We only had 30 volunteers moving as one line, calling his name every 15 seconds. Each time, the wind would answer. Around midnight, we started seeing people break. A woman collapsed by the gas station, sobbing. A teenager dropped his flashlight in a ditch and just stayed there, head in his hands. I've seen some bad outcomes over the years, but something about this one just hit different. Or maybe it was because how quiet everything had become. The land itself now felt wrong, and no one wanted to be out there anymore. We had helicopters in the sky by 2 a.m., looping wide, scanning everything with a 5-mile radius. At one point, one of the pilots radioed down that he saw movement in a ravine northwest of town. We rerouted 3 units. Turned out to be a pair of mountain lions, big ones. They were circling something below, visibly agitated by the noise from the chopper. They split off pretty fast and disappeared into the draw. That was our first real jolt of fear, because if Bowden was still out there, he wasn't just lost, he was now prey. Back at the command tent, a map of the area had pins and red grease pencil loops showing where we'd searched already. Most were tight grids, radiating from the Allen's house. I remember standing there just staring at it, and somebody muttered behind me, "It doesn't make sense, he couldn't have gone this far." And that's when the radio chirped again.
Dutton Ranch just called in, says he might have the kid.
There was this beat of total silence, then pure chaos. People scrambled. I threw myself back in the truck, took off westbound toward the Dutton place. It was 7 miles out, ranchland, brush, flat ground punctuated by low trees and gullies that didn't really look like much until you fell into one. Scotty met us out front, wearing boots and a t-shirt. He looked stunned, said his livestock dog, Buford, had come back round from the trees around 7 a.m., head low, tail stiff, leading somebody, and that somebody was Bowden Allen. He was covered in dirt, shoeless, shivering, but alive. I didn't believe it until I saw him myself. Bowden was so small to begin with, but now he looked like he was barely larger than a shoebox. Dirt was caked under his fingernails, blood on his lip from a split. His eyes weren't wide with fear like I expected them to be. They just looked tired. The kid probably didn't sleep last night. He didn't cry either, just clung to Buford's side, one hand in the dog's fur, like the two had known each other forever. Scotty said the dog was acting strange before dawn, wouldn't sleep, kept growling towards the woods. Around sunrise, he bolted off into the tree line. Scotty was going to go after him, but figured, hell, it's Buford. The dog fended off coyotes, scared off drunk passengers. He could handle himself. Then maybe 40 minutes later, out they came, Buford in front, and behind him this tiny little human in a tattered t-shirt and sagging diaper. We called for medics and wrapped the kid in blankets and gave him water. He said very few things, and none of it made sense when he did, bits and pieces, you know? He said, "I walked far." He also said, "I saw lights in the sky." And finally, the dog found me. Later, we tried to piece together how the hell he made it that far. 7 miles of rough and wild terrain. No shoes, no food, no water. He stopped walking before dark, according to him. Said he laid down by this tree, and that's where Buford found him, under this kind of den made of leaves and brush, likely where a deer had bedded down before him. The weirdest part to me is how close these mountain lions actually were. We went back and tracked their prints. They passed within a mile of where he'd been. Hell, maybe even closer than that. The terrain was full of deep arroyos and hidden folds. They could have been circling all night, quiet as death. But yet, Buford found him first. The medics cleared Bowden right there at the ranch. No hypothermia, no frostbite, no broken bones, just scratches, bruises, and exhaustion. His mom and dad showed up 30 minutes later. I've never seen a woman drop to her knees faster. His dad couldn't speak, just picked the boy up and held him so tight, I thought they both might pass out. People cry a lot in this line of work, but not usually the searchers. I think that morning even some of us were blinking back tears. We hiked that route later that day, starting at the Allen's property, retraced the possible path. It really didn't seem possible. The kid had covered more than 7 miles, some of it through steep gullies and loose rock, cacti, barbed wire fencing, and thorn patches, and then he just stopped, in the middle of nowhere, curled up under a tree like he knew somebody would come. We found Buford's tracks too. The Big Pyrenees had tracks straight through the cold brush, all the way to where Bowden had holed up, then led him home at a walking pace. No hesitation, no noise, just a mission. Back at the command tent, somebody pointed out the satellite flight logs from the helicopter that night. The chopper had circled Bowden's location twice, not directly overhead, but close enough that we should have spotted him, or something. A child out in the open, a warm body, anything. But he was invisible. Either he huddled up deep enough into the brush to avoid the infrared, or something else was watching out for him. And those mountain lions, rangers did confirm they were agitated, ears pinned, tracking something. They were moving toward where Bowden had been found. If Buford hadn't gotten there first, well, that's a version of the story I don't let myself think about for far too long. You spend enough time in search and rescue, you learn that luck and timing are as important as training itself. Sometimes the wilderness wants to keep what it finds, and this time, it let him go. That night I sat in my truck for a long while before heading inside. Still had mud on my boots and dust on my face, staring at the pines along the ranch. I thought about how that little kid had walked straight into the teeth of the desert and somehow came back out. No GPS, no flashlight, just instinct and the heart to keep going.